to Life by Design, episode 400. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Cratio Jug.
Happy to be here, as always.
Yeah, we are creators of Life by Design with many locations worldwide. Each week on the show, we discuss the principles and the practice of Life by Design. Today, we're talking about being overwhelmed. There's definitely a lot of that going on right now, Cratio, with people going back to school, not going back to school, needing a mask in some places, not needing a mask in another place. The
second lockdown pending,
Yeah, all of that stuff. So really the purpose of today's episode is to share with you how we handle overwhelm. And again, it's not as if we're absolute experts in all of these areas, other than to say we've had lots of our own overwhelm. And in looking back, for the most part, have handled it generally well. And so there's some strategies that I know we've used personally with success. And if we can impart any of that and it's valuable for the people listening in, then, that makes today's episode well worthwhile.
I totally agree. 100%.
So where do we start? It's crazy. The world's crazy. Everything's going on. What do we do? What do we not do? Jobs, money, school, travel, trips, family. Where do you start?
Yeah. So, I hope people who have been listening for a while, we always start at the same place. And that is being conscious of what's happening. You have to notice and you have to be conscious of the fact that you're overwhelmed before you can come up with strategies to deal with overwhelm, right? Like that's the first thing, going back to even like the Nathaniel Branden 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, this consciousness. You got to be open to the fact that this is actually happening, because if you are not open to, or you're not willing to admit it, then you are stuck. And that's the worst possible case.
For sure. I think, we've used the terminology endless amounts of times, but reality exists. Things are what they are. And step one is really taking a step back and acknowledging that this is what's up. And, without necessarily the immediate desire to fight against it, right? Because I know that for sure there's moments I have that, where,
Me too.
Can't believe this is going on. And, that's, BS. And, I'm going to do this instead. And then you kind of just step back and you go, okay, without the emotions, what is real? And regardless of how I feel about, COVID, or regardless of how I feel about wearing masks, the reality is COVID is happening. The world is responding in the ways it's responding, whether I agree or disagree to whatever, a level. But I have certain rules and regulations in my particular municipality that I need to follow, that my family needs to follow. And so agree or disagree, I have to play within those rules if I want to go ahead and do the things that I still want to do. And so that's what's happening. That's the reality. And then I'm left with the decisions as to, what level do I want to participate, and what level or where do I want to opt out of participation so I am not subject to those. And then going through that thought process and doing it with as little of emotional response as possible.
So hold on. I love that you gave a specific answer and we need to unpack it, because it's really important what you did there. And you did it inherently without mentioning what you were doing, because what you did was you automatically know what your values are and what you're trying to achieve. So you removed the emotion, and you objectively, just based on what your values are, made a decision on what you were going to do. Right. So the first thing, after you acknowledge the overwhelm, the next thing to do is to gain clarity over what's important to you, which is your values. Right. So you inherently know that. But here's the context in this situation is that you're still sharpening that clarity, and it took you 20 years to get here.
Correct.
Right. Which could be very, very difficult for people who are unclear. So, we gotta drop in give yourself some grace, but start learning what's really important to you. Right. Because using your specific example, you can say, screw all this. I'm not going to do any of this. I'm so upset. But in your mind, you're like, well, I have things that I want to accomplish in my life, and I have a practice that I want to grow, and a community that needs my help. So I need to do X, Y, and Z.
Right. Yeah, I think that that's really, where you need to figure out is,
Yep.
what is valuable to you in that sense. And just naturally, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I mean, I guess what you're saying is naturally for me, because I've gone through the process and I've, tried to clarify over and over and over again what it is that is important. And you're right. I like the idea that you brought up of weighing one versus the other. And that's really what it comes down to is without clarity, it's very difficult to do a comparison, right? If you don't know what the end goal is. For me, the end goal is that my family's safe, that my family's happy, that my business continues to serve my community and it thrives from a profitability standpoint. So I can go ahead and do all the things that I still love and want to do and take care of my family. And so if there's something that takes away from that, then, I'm going to go ahead and try and make a decision that makes that, less of a problem.
So hold on one second. Again, this is just unbelievably valuable. Like, you're so good at this, you don't even realize. Not only did you just state your values, but because I know you just stated them in order.
Right.
Hey, my family's safe and healthy. So your family's number one. But here's why I'm telling people this. Here's what the valuable lesson here is. Let's say something crazy happened and you had to give up I don't know how this would be possible. This is like, altruism fantasy land. But if you had to sacrifice your business for your family, you would, is what you're saying.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. If my family's safety was at risk, obviously that would be a painful experience in every way because, if you were just to flip those two, and obviously I don't, but let's say the business was slightly more valuable than my family, giving my family away to keep my business would be painful too. But you get the idea is that when things are of very high value to you, it would be horrible, but at the same time, this is the power in having a hierarchy of values. As horrible as it would not be as horrible as losing my family or seeing my family in harm. And so, yes, would I give my business away? Would I, whatever, not give it away, but you get the idea. Would I walk away in some way, shape, or form if it meant that my family would be safe and cared for? Absolutely. Yeah, no question about it. And I think that's, when you're making your day-to-day decisions, and hopefully maybe that's not as big as the decision has to be for you, but when you're asking yourself, okay, I'm overwhelmed and I'm stressed right now, what do I do in all this craziness? Then go back and ask yourself, well, what's most important, right? What are the most important things to me? What's my highest value? And I think for lots of people, it's going to be the safety and happiness of their family. And then, you can make decisions that are based on that.
Well, I think that's really the important part here is you've had, some people are unwilling to even to have those conversations with themselves. The fact that you had is exactly the point that we're trying to make. You need to organize in your mind, what's important and gain clarity around, what you would be, in the worst possible case scenario, what you would be willing to do. And that's where clarity comes from.
For sure. And I think, your idea of going through the worst case scenario, we've gone through that. We talked about that. We made all those decisions early into the quarantining period, made some financial changes, went through the stress and the strain, but really tried to be as unemotional as possible and stay super objective and, make decisions that were best. And, we've come out, in a very healthy, positive way out of all of this so far. But yeah, I think a lot of people, this is a place where they would likely sacrifice something, right? So I think you need to be very careful about the decisions you make. And when you're not clear or you get caught up in the fear, the emotion, when you get dragged into other people's value systems, then you risk making decisions that are going to be potentially of lower value because somebody else made that decision, right? Or somebody else told you that was the decision you made. And of course, we've always said, if you're making decisions that don't match your values, then you essentially are on the path to not feeling really great about yourself and your life. And that's essentially, what unhappiness is not knowing or pursuing your values. So, reality exists, number one, clarity in terms of your values, and a hierarchy, number two. And then I think number three, for me anyway, is being decisive. A large part of the problems that exists for people in their lives is their inability or unwillingness or whatever we want to call it to be decisive. And, I'm all for thinking, I'm all for, giving some rational thought to things, but really at some point you need to make a decision because a lot of the stress and the overwhelm I find comes from the uncertainty of actually having a plan.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. I think that's number 4 on my list. Number 3
Okay.
on my list. Yeah. I mean, I think you're going to agree with me. We just might rank them in different order. But number 3 for me is be mindful of the environment that I'm in. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I think far too much time is spent paying attention to media, fighting with other people, versus creating an environment that is nurturing with
Mm-hmm.
people who are inspiring, and then executing on plans becomes much easier when everybody around you is like, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing this, and we have
Right.
this savings account set up, and we feel this way about the situation. Um, you know, it's just been interesting. I've been watching, especially during this time. I feel very strongly about what's going on, and I execute very thoroughly based on the decisions around my health. I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting a real kick around watching people interact with me, and how just being around me, their decisions change very rapidly when they're around me versus when they've spent time away from me.
Yeah, and I think that, having trusted advisors in your life is very valuable. There's just things that, we don't know or we don't understand, and other people are going to impart a different perspective on that. So I think being conscious of that. I mean, there's lots of areas that, thankfully, this happens to be an area that is, heavily revolved around health. So I feel very confident in the decisions that we make for myself and my family, and others who are around me, I think are, affected in a positive way, I would hope, by the decisions we make. And of course, the decisions we make with the level of certainty that we make them, because now is a very uncertain time for people,
Of
which is
course.
some of that overwhelm comes from. But on the flip side, in terms of some of the financial decisions that we've made during this time, I sought out advice. I went to my trusted advisors and I said, what do you think about this? And I ran it through my filter and I ran it through my value systems. And I didn't in every case make the same decision that they were advising, but I did make a lot of decisions that, I was advised to make by the people that I trust. So even
Yep.
outside of this, I think it's a good reminder of why you need to build that, the boardroom in your life. We often call our family Richard's Family Inc. And, it's important to have a boardroom of trusted advisors, people that you can turn to both for health. It's probably a nice podcast to do in the future here at Cray Show, is just how to build your boardroom, but health, finances, relationships, all those different things. So you don't necessarily just depend on yourself 1,000%. Not that we shouldn't believe in ourselves, but I like to get differing opinions from people that I trust to help me make the decisions.
I think this is a little bit of a tangent here, but I think an interesting topic, would be, how to actually make a decision. Because I mean,
For sure.
because I mean, experts are experts, so it's not to say that like you should just throw away their opinion, but you also have to have an objective
Well, yes, exactly.
standard, right, from which to weigh. Because there's a whole bunch of experts saying some really crazy things today that doesn't take a lot of
Yeah.
knowledge to debunk. So
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesing podcast too.
Well, yeah, and I think, having your experts in advance of a crisis that you've taken time to vet, that you feel confident that they're aligned with your value system, and as you said, having your own lens and developing your own ability to think, which is important. And I think the thing to talk about here in terms of finishing up this concept is what we didn't say to do, which I think is actually the most important piece of this creation. We talked about reality, and we talked about clarity, and we talked about, the environment, and then making a decision, having a plan, being decisive. What we didn't talk about was, how to get rid of the overwhelm. Here's a stress management technique. Here's a tactic to try and reduce your overwhelm. We're talking about very fundamental principles, because remember, this is really the whole point, is that your emotional state is a product of how you think, right? Your emotional state is a product of, whether you're pursuing values or not. Your emotional state is a product of whether you're being decisive or clear. And so by addressing these more fundamental core components, you're changing the outcomes, right? These are really in stats, we call them, these are the lead metrics, right? These are the things you can actually do and address, and the lag metrics are how you actually feel, which are more difficult to modify, and they're more superficial.
Yep. Yeah, dude, I totally agree. That's exactly right. I think that's a great place to end.
Yeah. So guys, you want to get more on this in terms of building the fundamental blocks, then head over to the show notes, lifebydesign.com /podcast. We've got the 30-day Think by Design challenge that you can take there. It's free. As well, we've got the Think by Design book, which is a great starting point. So thank you, as always, for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.